Good morning. Today we are going to continue solving quadratic equations. Equations that the biggest exponent is square, so you have an x squared. But today we're going to use a different method. Today we're going to use a method called completing the square. We're going to complete the square in order to solve a quadratic equation. And that is California standard will be 14.0. Now, all of you guys remember that we can solve quadratic equations by factoring. So once you have a equal to 0, we can factor. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 15 will be 5 and 3. And once you multiply it, you should end up with a 8x. Once we factor it, and because it's equal to 0, we know that one or the other are equal to 0. So we can use a zero product property. X plus 5 equal to 0. Then we can move the 5 to the right, becomes a negative 5. X plus 3 equal to 0. Move the 3 to the right, becomes a negative. So x is equal to negative 3. Now, we can also use the quadratic formula. X equals opposite b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. In this case, notice that once we simplify it, because we end up with the plus or minus, we end up with two solutions. And if you notice, the solutions are exactly the same. So currently we have two methods that we can solve the same quadratic equation, but the solutions are the same. Today we are going to learn a new method. Today we are going to solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. So notice that it's the same equation. Now to complete the square, we have to use this formula. So go ahead and highlight it. B divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. Once we've done that, we can factor it, and we're going to be able to rewrite it as one binomial with the square. But don't worry, let's go through the process. It'll make a little more sense once we start. First, we want to be able to move the 15, the number, to the right. We want to leave the x's on the left and the number on the right hand side. We are going to have x squared plus 8x. We are going to leave some space so we can complete the square. And we're going to move the 15, becomes a negative 15 on the other side. And when I complete the square, I need to do the same thing to the other side. Now, to find out this number, we have to use this formula. It's going to be divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. So in this case, the value of b, I want you guys to highlight the value of b. The value of b will be 8. I want you guys to highlight it. And we're going to place that in here. So it'll be 8 divided by 2. Will be 4, and we're going to square it. That'll give us 16. So this is the number that we're going to add on both sides. So let's go through it again. We're going to take the value of b. Remember, this is a will be 1. We're going to take this number, b. We're going to divide by 2, and then we're going to square it. 8 divided by 2 will be 4, and 4 times 4 will give me 16. I'm going to add 16 on the left, and I'm going to add 16 on the right. A lot of you guys will be forgetting to add the 16 on the right hand side. I'm going to factor this out. Double parenthesis. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 16 will be 4 and 4. And I need to add up to a positive 8, so they both should be positive. And that will be equal to negative 15 plus 16 will be 1. Now, if you notice, they're both exactly the same. And that always will be the case on this type of problems. And since they're both the same, we can rewrite them as 1 squared. So there's 1, 2, we can square it. That'll be 1. Now, to get rid of the square, we're going to take the square root on the left and on the right. The square root and the square cancels, because that's the inverse of each other. Therefore, I have an x plus 4 is equal to, the square of 1 will be 1. And I forgot something. What did I forget? Correct. Every time we take the square root on both sides, we need to have a plus or minus. And the last step will be just to move my 4 to the right so I can leave the x by itself. Now, one of the key things that you have to remember is that you want to place your 4 before to the left of the plus or minus 1. So it'll be negative 4, then plus or minus 1. And we are going to end up with two solutions. We end up with x is equal to negative 4 plus 1, and or x is equal to negative 4 minus 1. So we end up with plus or minus, one with the positive, one with the negative. Same thing that we did right here. When we had plus or minus, when we had the plus or minus, we had one with the plus and one with the minus. So in this case, we have two solutions, one with the plus, one with the minus. X is equal to negative 3, x is equal to negative 5. So notice that we end up with the same solution. So if you notice, which one is the easiest one of them all? So we have three types of factoring, the same equation. Correct. This will be factoring will be the easiest one. Then the second easiest way to solve is the completing the square. And the one that's a little more challenging is the quadratic formula. But the problem is that you cannot always do factor. You cannot always factor, which is the case for example number 1. So let's continue to example number 1. In this case, if you try to factor, you're not going to be able to factor. You're not going to end up with a 6x once you do your happy faces. So let's go through this process of solve the following quadratic equation by completing the square. So you have to complete the square. First, we're going to move the x's to the left, the numbers to the right. Those two x's are already on the left, but we do need to move my negative 4. I'm going to move it to the right, becomes a positive 4. I end up with x squared plus 6x. I'm going to leave some space, and I'm going to move my 4 to the right hand side. Remember, what you do on one side, you need to add to the other side. So I want to make sure that you guys place both red lines. Now to complete the square, you can use the formula that we use above, which is b divided by 2 squared. But I'm going to take an easier process. I'm actually going to make it a little bit easier for you guys. So what I think, you just take half of this number. Half of 6 is 3, and then you're going to square it. 3 times 3 will be 9. So just take half of the number, so 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then square this 9. And you do that on the other side. Now, I'm going to factor this out. Double parenthesis, factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 9 will be 3 and 3. And we need to end up with a positive 6, so they both should be positive. I'm going to end up with 1, x plus 3 squared is equal to 13. Notice that because both of them are the same, I'm going to combine them into 1, and I'm just going to square it. Now, to get rid of the square, I'm going to take the square root on the left and on the right. The square root and the square cancels. I have x plus 3 is equal to the square of 13. But I forgot something. Every time you take the square root, what do you need? Correct. Plus or minus. Now I'm going to move my 3 to the right. Last step will be move to the 3 to the right because it's a negative. So I have x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's it. We don't need to do the 2 arrows because there's no square root of 13. Let's try one more example together. Letter B. First, you want to move your x's to the left, or you want to make sure that you keep your x's on the left, and your number, negative 3, move it to the right hand side, becomes a positive 3. You have x squared minus 10x. I'm going to leave some space. equal to positive 3. That becomes a positive 3 and the space. Now I can complete the square. So once you have your x's on the left and your number on the right, and we have your spaces, we're going to complete the square. You're going to take half of this number, and let's go and highlight this number. You're going to take half of this. Half of negative 10 will be negative 5, and then whenever you square it, negative 5 times negative 5 gives me positive 25. And I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. Now, I'm going to factor this out. Double parenthesis, and that's going to be equal to 28. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 25 will be 5 and 5. Now, they need to add up to a negative 10, so they both should be negative. Notice that they both are exactly the same. Therefore, I can go and rewrite them as 1. To get rid of the square, I'm going to take the square root on the left and on the right. The square root and the square cancels. So x minus 5 is equal to square of 28. And what did I forget? Plus or minus. And the last step will be to move my negative 5 to the right. So I move my negative 5 to the right, becomes a positive. Notice how I rewrite the 5 first, then the plus or minus the square of 28. So let's try 2 more. Example number 2. Solve the following quadratic equation by completing the square. So we need to complete the square. Go and highlight this as I did. And let's go start with letter A. You want to leave your x's on the left hand side and move your number to the right, becomes a positive. I have x squared minus 12x. I'm going to leave some space, and that is going to be equal to 5. And leave some space. I'm going to complete the square. I want you guys to highlight the letter B, which is negative 12. We are going to take half of negative 12, which will be negative 6. And then we're going to square it. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. I want to make sure that I see that little negative 6 in red. Tiny little negative 6, small. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to factor this out, and that will give me 41. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 36 will give me 6 and 6, and they both should be negative. Now I'm going to combine both of them into 1. So that'll be x minus 6 squared is equal to 41. To get rid of the square, I'm going to take the square root on the left and on the right. The square root and the square cancels. I have x minus 6 is equal to square of 41. And what did I forget? Plus or minus. And then the last step will be just to move my negative 6 to the right, becomes a positive 6. So 6 plus or minus square root of 41. And this will be my answer. Let's do one more. Letter B. Remember, you want to leave your x's on the left. You want to move your number to the right hand side. That'll give me x squared plus 8x. I'm going to leave some space, and this becomes a positive 2. Don't forget to write down your dashed red lines as well. Now, I'm going to highlight the letter B. I'm going to take half. Half of 8 gives me 4, and then I square. I want to be able to see the little 4 in there. Square will give me 4 times 4 is 16. And what I do on one side, I need to do to the other side. I'm going to go and factor this out. Gives me x and x. Factors of 16 will give me 4 and 4. I need to end up with a positive 8, so the both should be positive. On the right hand side, I end up with 2 plus 16 will give me 18. They're both exactly the same, as it should be. So I'm going to rewrite them as 1. X plus 4 squared is equal to 18. And now I need to get rid of the square. I'm going to take the square root on the left, and on the right, I have a x plus 4 is equal to the square of 18. And let's not forget your plus or minus. Move my 4 to the right. It's going to become a negative. X is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square of 18. So that's how we can complete the square. Remember, we can factor, use the quadratic formula, and complete the square. You get the same answer. None of these problems can be factored, so we have to complete the square. Now go ahead and do the objective method, try it, see what you get, and then I'm going to show you guys the answer and see if that's what you got. Okay? Give you guys a few minutes. Okay, so take the time to be able to do this. I'm going to show you guys the answer in a second. Make sure you have it done before so you can double check your answer. Okay, so let's go through the process. I'm going to go a little bit fast since I assume that all of you guys did it by yourself. So I move that 17 to the right hand side, becomes a negative. Leave some space, and that becomes a negative 17. Now to complete the square, I'm going to take half of 6, will gives me 3, and then I'm going to square it, gives me positive 9, right? Half of 6 is 3, 3 times 3 is 9, and don't forget to do that on the right hand side. I'm going to factor this out, double parentheses. On the right hand side, I'm going to end up with a negative 8. Gives me x and x, factors of 9 gives me 3 and 3. I need to end up with a positive, so they both should be positive. I'm going to combine them into 1. Now to get rid of the square, I'm going to take the square root on the left and on the right. The square root and the square cancels. I have x plus 3 is equal to the square of negative 8. Don't worry about the negative. And plus or minus. Move my 3 to the right, becomes say negative 3. Now some of you guys might be thinking, no, there's no solution because we cannot have a negative inside the square root, which will be correct. So this will be no solution. You cannot have a negative inside. Now, once you guys get to Algebra 2, we'll be able to deal with negative inside the square root, but not to Algebra 2. For now, you can give me no solution. That'll be perfect. Letter B. At this point, I assume that all of you guys have done letter B. If not, take some time to be able to work out letter B by yourselves first. Letter B. I'm going to move my 2 to the right. Becomes a positive of x squared minus 4x. Leave some space. Is equal to 2. And there's my space. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. And yes, I was supposed to highlight it as well. That's negative 2. I'm going to square it. Gives me positive 4. Remember, every time you complete the square, because you are squaring it, you will end up with a positive number, plus 4. Double parenthesis, that gives me 6. X, x, and x. Factors of 4 will be 2 and 2, and they both should be negative. I'm going to have an x minus 2 squared because they both of them are the same. It's equal to 6. The opposite of the inverse of a square is the square root, the opposite. That will cancel the square root. I have an x minus 2 is equal to square root of 6. And what did I forget? Correct. Plus or minus. And the last step is to move my 2 to the right, becomes a positive. X is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 6. And that'll be good. So be sure to be productive today and have a great day. Thank you.